Hi
Hi,
there.
Danny. Ah,
Hi, you guys.
Hi.
Christina, hi. We're welcoming you all to Tatanka's Living Room Presents. The title of this talk by Danny is A Spiritual Perspective on Trump, Coronavirus, and Climate Change. I want to acknowledge the Ohlone land that our home is on. We want to acknowledge all the indigenous people that all our homes are on and thank them for their care of the earth and the water and the sky and the animals and the plants. And acknowledge that we are not alone. We're not isolated individuals. There is no separation in all the universe. And as we get quiet, we can feel that even more intensely now. We welcome all our relations from all the four worlds of Grandmother Earth: mineral, plant, animal, and human. We welcome and know that we have ancestors, each of us and all of us, and their spirits are with us. Their counsel is with us, not just from the past, but voices from the future. The goal at this stage of Tatanka's Living Room is to tap into the universal spirit of humanity, which is in harmony with the nature and the universe, to birth a new movement of support for Romero Institute, for Danny, who will articulate, and I hope you'll feel in your hearts and your minds why this is important. We all have priorities. Carol and I have lots of things that we devote our time to, but in our minds, the best way to leave a legacy for the next 7 generations is also to align deeply as a community with Romero. So Danny, co-founder of Romero Institute with his partner, Sarah Nelson, constitutional attorney, long list of credits of beautiful showing up for people with courage and heart. We welcome you today and your talk on spiritual perspective on Trump, coronavirus, and climate change. Welcome, Danny.
Great. Thank you, guys. The last time we were together was 2 weeks ago, 14 days ago tonight, back on the 20th of March, just before the first day of spring. Since we were together last, we began to get this dueling perspective from the House of Representatives attempting to put $1 trillion into the economy to go to the working people and small businesses across America, and the Senate, led by the Republicans, wanting to have a $500 billion bailout to the corporations with no strings attached to it. And so that finally, both Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, the House and Senate Democratic leadership, got together with the Secretary of the Treasury, Mnuchin, and started having a negotiation with him, basically cutting out McConnell and the Republican leadership in the Senate to try to work out a deal. And they finally got to a point where they would agree that the Democrats were shaming the Republicans by going to the people every night on CNN and MSNBC and all three of the networks, pointing out what the Republican-dominated Senate was trying to do to shell out this money to the corporations, just like they had done back in 2008. And the Democrats started pointing out that back in 2008, when the $800 billion was given to the banks and to the corporations, a substantial amount of that money was given as bonuses to their executives, and they started buying back their own stock, and they started giving major dividends out to their shareholders. So the Democrats began to insist that those specific activities could not be undertaken with any of the money that was going to be going out to any of the corporations. They acknowledged that there should be money going to the corporations in addition to the small businesses, but they insisted upon having restrictions put on. They were insisting that money could not be used specifically for bonuses to their executives, could not be given to their stockholders as dividends, could not be given to buy back more stock, and very importantly, that money could not be used for public lobbying, and it could not be used to pay for political campaigns, since we're here in a campaign year. that the Republican Senate and Trump were demanding that they be given the $500 billion and be allowed to give it away with no strings attached whatsoever, so that the corporation could, theoretically, the corporations could use the money to pour into political campaigns of right-wing Republicans all across the country under Citizens United, the Supreme Court case that allows corporations to fund campaigns directly. And so the Democrats started shaming them in all the major media, New York Times, Washington Post, all the cable television channels and the networks. And so finally, the Republicans gave in, and they said, okay, we will agree to the $1.5 trillion that you want to give to the small businesses and to the people, $1,200 for every adult, $500 for every child, and money for the small businesses, and we'll agree to abide by the restrictions that you've put, not allowing the corporations to use the money for these few, half a dozen things that you said they couldn't do. And the House of Representatives insisted upon and got it put into the Senate bill that there would have to be a committee that was set up, made up of members of Congress, to which an inspector general that was going to be appointed under Secretary of Treasury Mnuchin. There was going to be a special inspector general overseeing this $500 billion that was going to be given out to the corporations, and this inspector general had to file consistent reports with a special committee made up of members of Congress or people that Congress were going to designate. And so this was actually put into the bill that was passed by the Senate and then immediately passed by the House. And when it came to the desk of Donald Trump, he, in a signing statement, signing the bill, said that the way that he was going to enforce this bill, he was not going to abide by any of the restrictions that had been put on the $500 billion going to the corporations. So that's where it stood. Our Romero Institute immediately went to the airwaves and started sending out reports to people about this and asking them to contact their congresspeople and insist, and this is an ask that I have on this discussion tonight, to immediately contact your congresspeople through the internet and get them to file a lawsuit against Trump and against Mnuchin, to request the federal district court in Washington, D.C. to issue a writ of mandate, a writ of mandamus. This is a specific legal cause of action that exists in the civil code of our United States government that allows a party such as the Congress to file a lawsuit against an executive branch official who is refusing to abide by the clear mandates of the law. So if there is a statute that is clear on its face that it does not allow any discretion in the executive branch officer, and the executive branch officer refuses to abide by the law, that a person withstanding or a party withstanding can go before the federal district court and ask for the issuance of a writ of mandate, or a writ of mandamus, as they call it, by which the court will command the executive branch official, in this case, President Trump and Secretary of State Mnuchin, and the Inspector General that is designated, is appointed by this particular piece of legislation, to abide by the mandates of the law. And so that's the first step that we need to all do. We need to immediately send a communication to our congresspeople, senators and congresspeople, demanding that they join together in a major federal lawsuit, demanding that the federal district court in Washington, D.C. issue a writ of mandate or mandamus to President Trump, to Secretary of State Mnuchin, and to whoever the Inspector General is that is appointed under this statute, to command them to abide by the restrictions that have been put on this $500 billion that are going to be going to the corporations. So this is one of the steps that was taken by Trump and is being taken by the National Republican Party in the face of this pandemic to attempt to utilize it as an excuse for transferring $500 billion of federal taxpayers' money to the major corporations. Now, a sub part of that was a specific effort on the part of Donald Trump to have $3 billion go to the oil corporations, the oil and natural gas corporations. He was saying, oh, these people have been hit hard by the pandemic, that people are not driving, and so the amount of gasoline that's being purchased and people aren't flying, all of that is going down. And he's ignoring the fact that it was going down before this because Saudi Arabia and Russia are having a major price war over oil and gas. And so that what Trump is trying to do in getting the Republican leadership in the Senate to do was to try to put a huge block of this money, $3 billion, to go immediately to the oil corporations to bail them out because they're at risk of going under during this pandemic. For example, there's another piece of good news that I want to share with you that many of you may not have heard it yet, that the Federal District Court in Washington, D.C., Judge Boasberg, has finally struck down the permit, the crossing permit for the Dakota Access Pipeline. That's a piece of good news here in the midst of everything else that's going on. But in the face of these adverse consequences that are being imposed now on the oil corporations through the divestment that's going on in the oil corporations, through the plummeting oil prices going down to $20 a barrel from $45 a barrel, from the major price war that's going on between Russia and Saudi Arabia, that the oil corporations have come on their hands and knees to Trump, demanding that they be given a major piece of this particular major bailout money. And they asked specifically for $3 billion immediately, which the Democrats in the House and Senate organized against and stopped that from being in the bill. They cut that out of the bill. And then they put these restrictions on the $500 billion so that none of it could go to oil corporations. And what now Trump has done in his signing statement is he has just given the back of his hand to that entire provision of the law that was hammered out in days and days of negotiations between the party leadership. And now he has just said he's not going to pay any attention to it at all. So the legality of these presidential signing statements is now at issue. They're absolutely unlawful, these things. They're unconstitutional. And now that we need to mobilize to get the federal lawsuit filed by the Congress of the United States to declare this illegal and to reimpose those conditions on the doling out of any of this $500 billion. So they should file the lawsuit, and they should not only be seeking the writ of mandate, but they should be seeking a temporary restraining order prohibiting any of that $500 billion from going out to any of the major corporations until those provisions of the bill have been complied with that enforce those restrictions. So this effort on the part of the Trump administration to take advantage of this terrible situation that we're in goes on and on. And now, for example, the Department of Interior has just called for an emergency sale of additional areas of federal parkland and areas of the Gulf of Mexico to additional oil corporations. And they've only given like 30 days notice of this. And that even though people are not allowed to gather in any kind of public gatherings to insist upon public hearings to be held before such a sale, they've canceled the public hearings, but they've gone forward with the sale without allowing anybody to have any public hearings about it, anybody to testify against it, so that they're completely lopsidedly enforcing these rules, saying, oh, we can't have any public gatherings where you could have a public hearing about this. But they've gone forward with the auction sale, where they announce to the companies that they're having this auction, and they hold the auction with people from the corporations coming to participate publicly in the auction. So these kind of things that the Trump administration is doing are completely consistent with the way that he's been acting since he came into office. And he is also, as I said, while he's declared himself to be a wartime president, purportedly engaging in war against the coronavirus, he's actually turned to making war against the Democratic governors. And he's insisting that the Democratic governors are not showing him adequate appreciation. He said, so when Governor Cuomo, for example, issues a public call for the need of 30,000 respirators to save human beings who are on death's door, the Trump administration sends 400 to the state of New York. And then they in questions publicly whether Cuomo really needs these at all. And then they turn around and refuse to give the supplies to a Democratic governor in Michigan. They refuse to give the supplies to a Democratic governor in Washington State. He refuses to give the adequate supplies to the Democratic governor of Illinois. And yet the Republican governors, like in Florida, a key swing state with a Republican governor, he gives them everything that they've asked for. And it comes immediately to him. I mean, look, at the fact of the matter is that this particular person, this particular human being is so devoid of any type of moral compass that he sees every single incident as an opportunity for him to attack the media, for him to attack his political rivals, his political adversaries, to reward people, to use the instrumentalities of government, to do favors now for Republican governors in swing states where he needs to have the votes. In addition to this, the Environmental Protection Agency under his administration is now taking advantage of this particular time period to roll back all of the environmental protection regulations. They've now come forward in this period of pandemic. They've come forward with a whole new list of regulations that they want to remove, the regulations that exist within the environmental protection laws, and they're trying to get rid of them now. And so that they, for example, there is a whole group of environmental regulations rules that they put out on March 18th. You know, right when everybody was going crazy over this whole thing. On March 18th, they put out a full panoply of Environmental Protection Agency rules and regulations with no public hearings, a 30-day deadline, and they lifted a whole set of oil and gas restrictions to allow them to release methane into the atmosphere now. They've removed all of those regulations, and they've and so now it's important for us to try to point out that aside from all of these things that are being done, that have been being done in the last 2 weeks since we sat down together here 2 weeks ago on a Friday, that I want to get back to this theme that is important for us to understand, that this entire crisis that's going on right now, with basically 90% of us in the country being under orders to stay in our homes and to refrain from gathering, in all of the extraordinary constraints that have been put on our country, this is nothing compared to what is coming in the very near future. At the end of this particular pandemic, the continued onset of the consequences of global climate change, which are being kind of pushed to the background right now, need to be kept front and center. We need to be learning from the lessons right now. That whole refusal to acknowledge the existence of a scientifically verified coming crisis, and then to deny it, not only ignore it, but then deny it, is an exact duplicate of what is going on with regard to the major Republican Party and the Trump administration with regard to global climate change. And the consequences, the number of deaths from the direct consequences of global climate change are going to dwarf the number of people that have been killed around the world by this particular epidemic. And yet the administration is still continuing to refuse to pay attention to it. Even the Democratic National Committee is still refusing to cope with the coming crisis of global climate change with the degree of seriousness that's going to be required. This is something that we began talking about last week. What is absolutely extraordinarily important is that we use this period of the pandemic to try to get people to understand the analogy that about what needs to be done before a crisis that is scientifically certain to come falls upon us, that there are steps that need to be taken ahead of time before the crisis comes. Otherwise, you're going to be swept away under the exigencies of the circumstances when the thing befalls us. This is something that has to be done. When you notice that the state of California, a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature, Democratic governor in the state of Washington, a Democratic governor and a democratically controlled legislature in the state of New York, when they started asking the federal government for assistance in the state of emergency, were being shunned comparatively. That what they've been trying to do is they've been trying to avoid the process of bidding against each other. You've all heard about this, that the private companies that own these things and manufacture these things are saying, well, if we've got a massive demand, we can raise the price for these things. That they're going to try to destroy those states unless they pay this kind of high money. And so they are doing that. So what the states are doing, the state of New York, the state of California, the state of Washington, and the state of Massachusetts, for example, are trying to reach out to each other now through a thing called interstate compacts. This is an extraordinarily important issue I want you to remember from this conversation tonight. There is this concept of interstate compacts that are allowed to be entered into, that whereby individual states can join together with other individual states and form a compact where they can actually govern collectively beneath the regulations of the federal government a particular common crisis that they have. For example, a particular underground aquifer may run beneath 3 different states. So those 3 different states can enter into an interstate compact governing the protection of the quality of that water in those states. What we're engaged in right now at the Romero Institute is we're researching how these 3 states, possibly 4 states, who all happen to be Democratic states, can join together through an interstate compact and work collectively, work as a unified entity to be able to address the pandemic that's going on in their states, because the federal government refuses to abide by the rules and refuses to protect them. And so that what we're doing is we're trying to craft a way that they can come together. I've been in communication with people that are in communication with Gavin Newsom and in communication with Governor Cuomo. And they're going to be reaching out to Governor Inslee to try to develop this interstate compact to deal with this crisis right now. What we want to be able to do is get them to stay in this interstate compact to deal with global climate change collectively. When the federal administration is refusing to address the issues of global climate change, we have to start drawing states into an interstate compact to be able to take action collectively among themselves so that they can protect us. This may sound a little esoteric, but it's an extraordinarily important thing that's going on right now. I'm just letting you know about it. I've been in communication with the former chief of staff of a governor of California who has direct access to Governor Newsom, and they have direct access to Governor Cuomo and to Governor Inslee. So we're trying to have those 3 states lead this development of interstate compacts. And I want to be extremely careful about this because I don't want this collective of interstate compacts to be just among democratic states. I mean, that's basically almost creating a secessionist movement from the federal government. So it's going to be important for some of the Republican governors to join in this interstate compact to help protect their own citizens. So we're hoping that the Republican governors are not going to be given such privilege by the federal administration that they're going to be reluctant to join in such an interstate compact. But that's an important thing for you to know, that we're in the process of participating in that process right now at a very high level to get this thing to happen during the pandemic, because it's so vital for the protection of the people during this crisis. But we want it, as I said, to stay in place, to have this interstate compact for dealing with crises like this, and have them deal with the global climate change, so that when we move the California Green New Deal into place here in the state of California, that we can then get the state of Washington to do the same thing. We can get the state of New York to do the same thing. We can get the Illinois to do the same thing. We're trying to get the states to pass a comprehensive Green New Deal that is far more forward-leaning than the federal government is willing to do, so that we can try to get around the fact that McConnell is there controlling the Senate, so that there are other people that are going to come to you and say, well, let's all make sure we all organize and get the Democrats to take over the Senate and to get a new Democratic president. But the reality of it is, if the Democratic Party under the leadership of Joe Biden doesn't take the kind of steps that are necessary to really reach out and protect our people against global climate change, because they too are beholden to the oil corporations. They too are deeply in bed with the major corporations and the banking and financial interests and insurance corporations and Goldman Sachs and all the others. That if they continue to remain subject to the control of the oil corporations by taking major money from the oil corporations for their campaigns, we're going to have to do something about this. And I'm not suggesting that we have a full-scale revolution, and I'm not suggesting that we have a new confederacy, which is a blue confederacy. The Democratic states all combine together in an interstate compact to set up their own government, in effect, beneath the federal government. But something has to be done. Something has to be done. And I'm insisting, among all the different conversations that I'm having, I'm insisting that we do everything that we can do to do this inside the present laws, that we can utilize our Constitution, we can utilize our laws authoring interstate compacts. I'm trying to do everything that we can do, because other people are starting to talk now about the need to overthrow this entire government structure. They're hoping that at the end of this pandemic, that the government will have been so weakened that they're in a condition where the people can rise up collectively and somehow overthrow the power of the federal government. I don't want that to have to happen. I've been criticized upon occasion by people that are Leninists or Stalinists or others who think that our Christic Institute and our Romero Institute are too conservative, because we keep on relying upon the government structures. We keep suing inside the federal courts. We keep reaching out to people in the United States Congress. We reach out to people in the Justice Department. We reach out to state governors in legislatures. And they keep on thinking that we're basically like Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football. that we keep on doing this, and the bad guys keep winning, and they keep on getting stronger. But I think that we have a special obligation, those of us who believe in the Constitution of our government, who believe in the ability of democracy to rise up, even in the face of some of the hurdles of the electoral college, in the kind of overweighting of the votes of the people that are in the conservative smaller states and in the rural areas. We can overcome this. This is one of the reasons why the Christic Institute existed, and why the Romero Institute exists, to be able to provide counsel to our people, our progressive people in the country, of how we can get to where it is that we need to get without going outside of the boundaries of the law. And that's what we're here to provide. And that's why we have the California Green New Deal. It's why we have the 50-page outline of the Green New Deal, why we have now a 400-page, we've been working on it while we're confined here at home. We have a 400-page initial partial draft for the actual body of the Green New Deal. That we have very specific solutions that we're proposing. Sarah has given me here that in the energy area, the generation of electrical energy, what we want to do is to get the entire state of California, every county in the state of California, to set up its own community choice energy company, like we have here in Santa Cruz County, Monterey County, San Benito County, how it's being done now down in San Luis Obispo, down in Ventura, down in Santa Barbara. We're bringing all of our offices working directly on this to bring all of those county boards of supervisors into the community choice energy company of the Monterey Bay Central California area. As I mentioned last week, we're working with all of these legislators and electeds to get them to participate in a global climate change action program for the entire region, so we can coordinate all of the activities of all of the counties in Central California. And we want to be able to have that reach out into Northern and Southern California as well. And then we want to have it be able to reach out up into the state of Oregon, up into the state of Washington. We want to get the entire West Coast completely dedicated to community choice energy that has completely sustainable energy here. So that under the energy plan for the Green New Deal, that's one of the things we're shifting over to all renewables and non-carbon generating renewables. With regard to the transportation, we've actually for the first time anywhere, I think, that we've actually put into our bill, actually having a date certain by which that fossil fuel cars cannot be sold in the state of California, and a deadline where fossil fuel cars cannot be driven in California. Not just putting higher taxes on them so they can just pay more money to keep on polluting, but prohibiting them from being sold, prohibiting them from being driven, that in no trucks or trains or planes can come into this state that are being run on fossil fuels. Now, this is a very aggressive program that we're talking about doing here. But as I've said before, that Greta Thunberg has said, as she told the people at COP40, that, that so long as you keep on proposing doing things, just those things that are presently acceptable for the presently elected representatives, rather than what it is that has to be done, then my generation shall have no hope at all. And so that someone has to do this. Someone has to put forth the bill that really says what has to happen here, and to show that it can be done. That I won't say if you can't do it in California, you can't do it anywhere. What I'm going to say is that if we can do it in California, we can do it everywhere. As I said again last week, that we citizens of California are just like every other American, only sooner. This is what we have to do. We have to be able to show that this can be done. We need to show what has to get done and that it can be done. We have all kinds of standards for the transition of industry over into sustainable energy, and not just putting cap and trade so they can just pay more money to get to continue to pollute, or to buy credits from some other company that doesn't even need to pollute. And this cap and trade idea is a terrible idea. It's just a terrible idea. It's just a compromise that's been struck by legislators who are on the take from the oil and gas companies to be able to continue to do that. They continue to pay for the extra credits to do the polluting, and then they take it, the cost of it, as a cost of doing business, as a tax deduction. So it's the government paying them to pollute. This has got to stop. And Joe Biden, for example, in the Democratic National Committee, is proposing net zero emissions by 2050. That is a disastrous plan. That we are talking in this bill about having zero emissions by 2035. We're talking about net zero emissions by 2030. This is 20 years earlier than the Democratic Party is proposing at the present time. And this can be done. We can demonstrate that this can be done here in California. And we need your help in doing this. We are going to have you work with us to reach out. We're going to have to fan out across the state to go to everybody's homes and knock on their doors, to get them to contact their legislators, to get them to support this bill when we come forward with it. Obviously, we're going to shut down the remaining nuclear power plant. We're going to have to prohibit any resort to the use of nuclear power. The buildings that we're going to require and we are requiring now in Santa Cruz County, that any new building that is built on public property anywhere has to be completely electrified, and it has to be completely sustainable sources of energy, electric energy, with no fossil fuel energy whatsoever. None of the cars that are going to be purchased, any of the vehicles that are going to be purchased by Santa Cruz County from this point forward can be fossil fuel cars. The police are still resisting us on this. So as I've laughed, we're going to have to get them Teslas, I guess, because they don't think that the other they need a fossil fuel car to be able to go 1,000 miles an hour in 2.3 seconds or something. But what I want to say in closing, in the last couple of minutes that we have together, and I want to abide by our time. I know it's your Friday night and that you're with your families now. But what I want to say is, look, the most important single thing I want to be able to say is that, look, we've got to be able to substitute for this kind of negative, hostile, critical attacking of everybody who disagrees with us, whether they're in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, whether they're more conservative than we are or more progressive than we are. What we have to do is we have to bring to this discussion a genuinely spiritual appreciation of the situation that our human family is in, and all the other living things on our planet are in right now. The threat, as animals are subject to this pandemic with the virus, and they're subject to the same consequences of global climate change that we are. We're losing thousands of species every year to global climate change. We have to, this is a state of emergency, and we're going to have to maintain this state of emergency even after this pandemic is over. And that state of emergency has to be to address global climate change. We need to infuse this with a type of spiritual understanding that gets regular people to understand our intimate, bonded relationship with all living beings, not only all other human beings, but all other life forms on our planet, and the life of our very planet itself that gave rise to us, that gestated us up out of this earth. That we have to get people to appreciate this. That's what the Romero Institute and the Christic Institute is going to be doing. We're going to be setting up a 501c4, Christic 501c4, for being able to lobby. We're going to be setting up a PAC, a political action committee, a Christic Institute, public advocacy group, and political party, political action group. That's what we have to do. We can't. We have to find candidates. We have to raise up candidates, that the women and men who are going to stand for these things and be able to advocate this from a spiritual place, from a place of love and compassion and sharing, so that we can demonstrate to other people all across the country about how this can in fact be done. We do not have to spend all of our time tearing down people. We need to lift people up and buoy them up and have them filled with hope. So I appreciate your coming here together tonight. I haven't been able to see you for the last half hour because my little machine went ape here. but I know that you can see me, and I know. So Sarah's calling me away now. She says that's enough. Don't belabor our poor friends on Friday night. So look, I hope you appreciate this. I hope you're well. Look, if you will, try to get two other friends, two other groups in other homes 2 weeks from now, when we can come together again. So I appreciate it. Even though I can't see your face, I can feel your heart, and I love you dearly. And I'm totally appreciative of the hour that we've had here together on
Annie,
Friday night.
before you leave,
Yes.
I want you to hold on just for a couple minutes more.
Yes.
I want to, and I'm going to put the spotlight back on you after I say what I need to say. So you can get your question answers at romeroinstitute.org. Also, Romero is at a time, we're all in lockdown, where they need money for all the things that they do. And Carol and I's idea here with the Tonka's Living Room is to create the beginning of a movement of energy, of pure appreciative energy that can translate into money. So we're asking people to, as Danny said, bring a person, bring 2 people. If you can get this information out to your list and bring 10, great. We have room for, until we upgrade with Zoom, we have room for 300 people. We have probably, with a number of you have 2, you hear there's about 100 people on the line, because there's a couple of people with 3, a couple of people with 2. I mean, a lot of people with 2. But we want to double this, and then double it, and then double it, and then double it as we go through this 100 days, of which we're through the first 10 or 15 of it. And so every other week we're going to meet. Please contact some other folks to come back. And I want to ask you, Carol and I know we've all got commitments. We want to ask you to commit monthly to something that you can afford. It's like Tatanka's Living Room. Some people can afford near nothing. Some people can give a lot. I know there are people on this line that can afford $100 or $200 or $500 a month. There are people on this line that can't afford 30. But think about 20, think about 15, think about 10, think about the gas you're saving. Personally, I shared last week, I've just decided not to eat on Fridays, and that liberates another $40 that I can pass on to my favorite nonprofit here. So please go to your heart, do what you can. We all do what we can. There's no shaming here. Just do what you can. My feeling is that with everything else we're doing, if we don't understand this crisis, as Danny's talked about it, the coronavirus crisis, and translate it with a genuine, loving, spiritual infusion to solve the climate crisis, we will have no legacy to leave to future generations. And right in our midst here, we have the ability to do it. This is the organization that has proven itself over 40 years, doing this over and over, with the people, with the law, with everything, with the spirit of it. So although Danny didn't spend 60 minutes talking about the spiritual perspective, that last 5 minutes and understanding his heart, because Danny and Sarah are people who are the eye in the storm. And we all need to be that eye in the storm, and giving what we can to Romero will further that for each of us. So I'm going to pass it back to Danny, and Carol's going to say something. I'm going to pass it back to Danny, and he might have a final word, and then we want to open it up for you to thank him. Okay, go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, so this is really important to us, that we can gather here as a community. And I want you to know that gathering, bringing more people to expand the vision of what we're doing, and to be able to help fund in a big way what is being done here, we can be a huge primary force for change in California, in the country, and to be a template to make major change in the world. And I want you to get how powerful and how important that this is, and that we're here on purpose at this time. I feel it is one of the most important things that we can do to coalesce this energy of who we are and channel it towards this really important work that's being done. So people and funding, if we can do that and do it all together, it would be absolutely magnificent on so many levels.
Okay, put Danny back.
All right, well,
And
Danny,
thank you.
go ahead and speak. We're muting ourselves.
Okay, so I'm actually back. I can actually see everybody now. I just want to thank you very, very much for doing this, and thank everybody for coming together on a Friday night. I'll do my best to not only monitor what's going on here during the weeks between our talks, but also to share with you more details about what it is that can really be done, so you can think practically of what to do while we're all at home here, to work together to get this Green New Deal put together and enable you to understand it better, so you can share the information with your friends. So thank you so much for
Thank you. Thank you, Danny.
we just need to keep our people together. You know that all of our people are at home working now. They've brought their computers that we provide for our staff. They've brought them home. They're working from home. They're working to edit videos and stuff from home. So we're going to keep going here so that we can share the news, like when we finally win this thing with the Dakota Access Pipeline and get the crossing permit struck down. We can tell you about it, so we can share that piece of information, those pieces of information with you, and then work together to make this thing happen here in California and have it spread across the country and the world.
Thanks, Danny.
Here, and
Danny.
ask
Thank you,
to say hi to
Susan.
Danny.
So
Thank
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Esther.
Danny.
Joel.
Hi, Danny.
Danny.
It's Mark and Simona.
Mark and Simone, you little rascals. All right, you guys.
Oh my God.
Christy, my dear.
Love you, Mark.
Okay, you guys.